Let me explain clearly what I mean by this. Before 3i Atlas reached its point of closest approach to Earth, we had a normal and expected amount of information. We had light curves, we had spectral readings, we had trajectory calculations, and positional data. These were standard observations, the same kind of measurements we collect for any newly discovered object moving through space. Nothing about it stood out at first. Then the object passed within 0.6 astronomical units of Earth, which is approximately 90 million kilometers. That distance is close enough for extremely detailed observations using our existing instruments. And that is when something occurred that should not have been possible according to our current understanding of physics and observational astronomy. The number of usable data points suddenly tripled, not because we introduced new instruments or upgraded our technology, but because the same telescopes, observing the same object, began detecting signals they had never recorded before. New frequencies appeared, distinct patterns emerged, mathematical relationships became visible in the variations of light output. Phenomena that were completely invisible before the closest approach suddenly became detectable afterward, almost as if the object had been dormant and our proximity somehow activated it. Now, I know what the obvious explanation sounds like. Perhaps the object was simply closer, making faint signals easier to detect. That explanation would normally be logical, it would normally make sense. However, there is a serious problem with that reasoning. Some of the newly detected signals appeared in wavelengths we had already been monitoring continuously. We were already watching those exact frequencies long before the flyby. They showed nothing. They were silent. After the close approach, they suddenly became active. Distance alone does not explain this. Distance does not selectively switch electromagnetic frequencies on and off like a control panel. I want you to understand the significance of what we are dealing with here, because it truly matters. It matters far more than most space-related headlines you will ever see. The first detection of this anomaly came from the Gemini Observatory in Hawaii. They had been tracking 3i Atlas throughout its approach to our solar system as part of standard protocol. Data was collected every 6 hours, including measurements of light intensity, color shifts, rotational behavior, and structural changes, everything astronomers normally expect to observe. At that stage, the object appeared exactly as predicted. It was tumbling slowly through space, reflecting sunlight in consistent and predictable ways. It appeared dark and elongated, moving at an extraordinary speed of roughly 31 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. Then, on November 18th, it reached its closest point to Earth. The Gemini team continued observing without any changes. Same telescope, same instruments, same observation schedule. But at 08 Sour UTC on November 19th, the dataset changed. A technician named Sarah Chen was the first person to notice it. While reviewing overnight data, she detected something in the readings that had not existed just 24 hours earlier. A faint but highly regular low-frequency radio signal pulsing every 1.7 seconds with remarkable precision. Her initial assumption was interference, possibly a satellite, ground-based radio noise, or instrumentation error. She immediately checked the calibration systems. Everything was functioning perfectly. She then contacted other observatories. They were detecting it as well. The European Southern Observatory in Chile confirmed the same signal at 11:30 UTC, identical frequency, identical timing. Soon after, the Keck Observatory in Hawaii detected it, followed by radio telescopes in Australia. Independent facilities across the globe were all recording the same repeating signal originating from the same source location in space, the interstellar object that had just passed Earth. What made this even more unsettling was what we discovered next. Archived data was reviewed in detail. Every observation from the previous 6 months, dating back to the object's first detection in August, was re-examined. Those exact radio frequencies had been monitored the entire time. There was nothing, no signal, no trace. Absolute silence. Then the object passed Earth and the signal appeared. Scientists began searching for explanations. One idea was that the object rotated into an orientation that allowed radio emissions to escape. Some natural objects behave this way. Pulsars, for example, rotate and emit beams of radio waves. Perhaps 3I Atlas was doing something similar. That hypothesis survived for about 6 hours. At 1845 UTC on November 19th, a second signal appeared, different frequency, different waveform, pulsing every 3.4 seconds, exactly twice the original interval. Shortly after, a third signal emerged at 5.1 seconds, 3 times the base rhythm. The mathematical relationship was exact. This level of precision is not characteristic of natural variation. Natural celestial objects do not organize emissions into perfect numerical multiples. Pulsars spin at fixed rates due to physical laws, but they do not coordinate multiple emissions into synchronized mathematical patterns. That kind of behavior implies something else, something we do not yet have a proper framework to describe. The data continued to expand. On November 20th, optical observations revealed another anomaly. The object's brightness was fluctuating in patterns that precisely matched the radio pulses. When the 1.7-second radio signal occurred, visible light dimmed slightly. When the 3.4-second signal appeared, the dimming was stronger. Radio and visible light were perfectly synchronized across different regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. You need to understand how rare this is. Most celestial objects emit radiation independently across wavelengths. Hot rocks glow in infrared. Comets release gas that scatters sunlight randomly. Coordinated emissions across multiple wavelengths require structure, mechanisms that link different physical processes together. I contacted colleagues at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Their deep space network was detecting the same synchronized patterns. Massive radio dishes in California, Spain, and Australia were all pointed at this small, dark object as it continued moving away from Earth at incredible speed. All of them were recording the same expanding dataset. One scientist I spoke with, a woman who has worked in interstellar research for over 30 years, said something that stayed with me. She said, "We are watching information reveal itself, not emerge naturally, but reveal itself as if it was always there and hidden." And she emphasized that something about passing Earth seemed to trigger that revelation. On November 21st, spectroscopic analysis added another layer to the mystery. Absorption lines appeared that had not been visible before. Specific wavelengths were being absorbed by material on or around the object. These signatures indicated the presence of complex organic molecules, the kind found in interstellar space, but usually in extremely low concentrations. Here the concentrations were unusually high, far stronger than what the object's estimated mass could reasonably support. It appeared as though the object was surrounded by a cloud of organic compounds that only became detectable after the Earth encounter. Leading astrophysicists were called into emergency sessions, not because anyone believed aliens had arrived, but because we were dealing with a genuine and undeniable scientific anomaly. The changes correlated precisely with the object's closest approach to Earth. Some researchers suggested solar-wind interactions as a cause, but solar activity remained constant. Others proposed tidal stresses from Earth's gravity, possibly creating cracks that released trapped gases. But tidal cracking is chaotic and random. It does not produce synchronized mathematical timing across multiple frequencies. The dataset kept growing into late November and December. Infrared observations revealed temperature oscillations locked to the 1.7-second rhythm. Ultraviolet instruments recorded flashes that aligned with optical dimming. Every wavelength showed coordinated behavior. By early December, we had gathered more data in 3 weeks than we typically collect from a comet in 3 years. On December 9th, analysts studying the light curves discovered something remarkable. When plotted over time, the brightness variations showed structure, not randomness. Short, bright phases followed longer, dim phases in repeating sequences. These sequences formed groups that followed mathematical rules. Some researchers quietly referred to them as phrases, similar to musical motifs repeating in different combinations. No one claimed communication. But organized patterns require energy control and timing mechanisms. Natural processes rarely produce that level of coordination. The scientific community became divided. Some argued a natural explanation must exist and had simply not been discovered yet. Others insisted all possibilities should remain open. In mid-December, the European Space Agency released a carefully worded preliminary report. It stated that the observations were consistent with either a previously unknown natural phenomenon or an artificial interstellar structure. Those were the only explanations that fit the data. That single word, artificial, changed the conversation entirely. The object is now about 2.4 astronomical units from Earth, roughly 360 million kilometers away. The signals are slowly fading as distance increases, not because they have stopped, but because they are spreading out through space. Eventually, detection will no longer be possible. This has created urgency. Multiple space agencies have proposed interception missions, but the challenges are enormous. 3I Atlas is moving at 31 km per second, faster than our current spacecraft. Gravity assist trajectories could work, but they would take years to implement. Still, proposals continue because scientists understand what is at stake. The instruments did not change. The technology did not improve. The object did. Or perhaps our access to it did, as if a door opened at the moment of closest proximity. That idea does not frighten me, but it deeply unsettles my curiosity. And whatever the truth turns out to be, one thing is certain. The data expanded, and it did so precisely when this interstellar visitor passed closest to our world. That is not speculation, that is measurement, and we are still watching it unfold.